As the story begins, Elizabeth, daughter of Duke Fontini, was called forth in front of the king, and he declared that as of this moment she had lost all her title and was banished from this kingdom. The nobles present in the room were overjoyed, as they all called her a villain and were happy to see she was getting what she deserved. The king questioned her if she had any last words. However, she looked him straight in the eye, and, with full confidence, she told him that she had nothing to say to them. Turns out she had already expected something like this to happen for a long time now, and she did not have any grudge against them. As the daughter of a duke, her appearance was very attractive, and people often thought that she was a bully. Some girls even used to accuse her of things that she did not even do, and it just kept going. She was also seen as a rival to Princess Rosetta, and as those misunderstandings continued to grow, people just branded her as the villain. Since she could not really go against the royal family, she just accepted her punishment. And so, at the age of 18, she was now stripped of her title as the duke's daughter, and she was just an ordinary girl now, like the rest. In the neighboring kingdom of Rameza, in the remote region of Cloreras, there was the Norcia church, and everyone had thought that she would live there in despair. However, in reality, the moment she arrived there, she felt completely free. Although at the beginning, she was also a bit worried about what kind of life awaited her when she made her way to this remote place, the place of her banishment, since she did not really have any convenience at the Norcia church. And on top of that, when her family disowned her, most of her belongings were liquidated. The consolation money was gifted to the church, so it was practically swimming in riches now. Just then, while she was outside doing her routine work, another sister called out to her and excitedly informed her that they were getting roast pork with apples for today's dinner. Her name was Lucinda, and she was 21 years old. But then sister number 2, Roxanne, who was just 17 years old, came out of her room and told her to have some self-control and not act like a child. When the kids overheard them, they got really excited, and just then, the head sister, Hild, came outside as well to calm them all down. But the kids had gotten way too excited, and they began to demand meat. Since she could not really refuse them when they were that excited, Hild agreed to make it for them, and she asked Elizabeth to help her out as well, to which she agreed. Luckily, in this place, she had found 2 open-hearted sisters and a very understanding head sister. Later, as the 2 of them were cooking up the meat, she showed Hild how she had cooked it up perfectly. But then the head sister just stared at her and brought up how nobles like her weren't really supposed to be allowed in their kitchens. Elizabeth agreed that that was indeed true, and back in the Duke's household, she was never even allowed near the kitchen. Since that was the case, Hild was quite curious to know how, even though she had been here for a month, from the start she had been able to dress herself, and she even enjoyed doing laundry, given that she had never done any of those things before. Elizabeth just chuckled and said that she had always wanted to try this stuff, while in her mind she contemplated how she had never been able to live like this in the Duke's household. She remembered that these tasks were something that she had done in her previous life, and turns out she actually had some memories of her previous life. In her previous life, she was just an ordinary event planner, and her name was Yuka Sawatani. She used to do most of her work with displays, exhibitions, and events like mini-concerts, sports events, parties, etc. In that life, her methods of transportation were not just limited to walking or carriage. They had trains, taxis, airplanes, and all that kind of stuff. In short, it was just a regular world. Her colleagues who had started at the same time as her slowly dropped out, and just like that, she was the only newbie left in her company, since nobody else had joined the company after her. Even though the working conditions were really terrible, at the end of the day, she still loved her job very much, and it always made her feel like it was worth doing it. One day when she was taking a bath, she was planning for an event that was just the next day, and everything was going as expected. Getting bored, she then grabbed her gaming switch, and as she played a fantasy game, she hoped to someday get a request to do a Princess Dawn event as well. Just then, she remembered that she had totally forgotten about putting t-shirts signed by the company president in gift bags, but since she could not really do anything about it right now, she decided to do that first thing tomorrow morning. Putting that aside, she just hoped for the event to go smoothly and that everything else was okay. However, it turns out that was her last memory, and just like that, her previous life ended in that bath. When she opened her eyes, she realized that she had been reincarnated in a 5-year-old's body, and she was drowning in a water-related incident. The people nearby saved her from drowning, and when she gained consciousness, she actually realized that she could remember everything from her past life. She was already able to read from a very young age, which even shocked her parents, since it was clearly not normal for someone of her age to start reading directories of nobles. But what she was really doing was trying to get some answers about this world. Going through all that information, she learned that she was actually inside the world of the fantasy game she was playing before she died in her previous life. In that game, the main protagonist was a princess of the Kingdom of Moyers, and it was basically a game meant for girls where the player falls in love with the princes from the neighboring kingdoms. However, the heroine who drowned in the love of all the princes was not her. She was, in fact, in the body of the villainous rival who gets banished at the end of the game. When she realized that, she panicked a lot, as she did not want to get banished, and so she tried her best to become a good person. But whether it was the force of the game's system or her own awareness of her surroundings, it became almost impossible for her to escape from her inevitable banishment at the end of the game. And so, coming back to the present, that was the reason why she was here in this church now, helping out the head sister to make dinner. Hilda was, in fact, happy that she did not have to hold her hand through everything, and it was nice to see that she already knew how to do the basic chores, while Elizabeth thought to herself that for someone who was so pretty, the head sister was quite calculative. The church did not possess any fortune, neither the food was any special or luxurious. However, the things that they had were still more than what Elizabeth was expecting from a self-sufficient church lifestyle. In the end, she was just happy that everyone there was able to eat their delicious food to their heart's content. With that said, since they were almost done, Hild asked her to go outside and play with the children for a little while, and she agreed. As she went outside, she contemplated how when she was reincarnated into this game world, she had soon realized that it was no longer fictional. The sky continued past the edges of the screen, and there was a real country with real people, and all of the NPCs now had names and thoughts of their own as well. After living as one of the main cast of this story of the game for so long, she was now finally free from the story and was no longer forced into a role. Now, she lived in the countryside with 4 other sisters, the priest, and 10 children, which made her feel like she was living a completely new life now, a third life. Here, she could do whatever she wanted to, unlike when she was the daughter of a duke. Since it was a remote countryside, even if she used her memory of her previous life to invent some conveniences, it was completely fine as long as no one found out about it. The perfect example was her knowing how to do the basic chores, even though she had lived the majority of her life as a princess. Therefore, as she was playing with the children, she genuinely felt free, and she planned to enjoy this long-awaited freedom to the fullest. However, something changed when a mysterious man arrived on her doorstep. He looked really serious, and Elizabeth recognized that man as the head knight, since she had actually seen him before. She asked him why someone as busy as him had come all the way out there, but the knight did not respond and continued to stare. She remembered that his name was Leonid Guardhelm, and he was also known as the Sacred Lion's Sword, but she could not understand what he was doing there. Turns out that man was the natural enemy of hers who chased her out, and was also someone she was never able to befriend. He was the lord who commanded all the knights of the Kingdom of Moyers. He was just a regular NPC who did not have any path in the game, nor did he have a face or any distinguished features. However, living inside this world, she always knew that she was being watched in the capital city by him, but it still did not make any sense why he had come after her when she had already been banished. He just kept staring at her intimidatingly, and it was starting to scare her a little, even though she had not done anything bad. So she once again questioned him about what he wanted. He went up to her and shouted that he had followed her all the way there, confirming that it was exactly what she had thought. He grabbed her hand and said that he wouldn't let her run away like that, while she kept telling him to let go of her. However, the kids, on the other hand, were simply amazed to see a real knight, and they started pulling him, requesting him to show his big sword and some of his fighting moves, which distracted him as well. Elizabeth was quite surprised to see how the kids were getting attached to a scary-looking guy like him, and she wondered if they were able to see something in him that she could not. Just then, the other 2 sisters came outside as well, and they asked her who this man was. Both of them were very curious and just assumed that he must be Elizabeth's guest, so they invited him inside. Just as he was about to explain himself, Elizabeth intervened and made it very clear that he was neither her acquaintance nor her guest. But the kids, on the other hand, were still clinging to him, and they requested him to just come inside and have dinner with them, since it was Elizabeth who had cooked dinner for them. He was quite surprised to hear that she was actually cooking now. Hild noticed all the commotion that was going on inside, and seeing how Elizabeth and Leonid were interacting with each other, she assumed that they must be close friends, so she called out all the children to come back inside, and as for the two of them, she decided to prepare a table just for them in the garden where they could have their dinner, which left Elizabeth completely confused. A few moments later, the two of them sat outside to eat, and she just kept thinking what the hell was going on here and how it all turned out like this. He started eating the food that she had made, and although his expression did not really change much, the way he was eating made it seem like he was enjoying it very much, as he was already down to his third one. Seeing that, she began to wonder if there was enough for him, and if not, she was afraid that he might get angry. After he was done eating the sandwich, he once again started staring at her and then told her that from now on, he was going to come and check on her every single day. Shocked, she asked him why he was not going back home from there, and more importantly, she also pointed out that there was no inn in this village. However, he informed her that he had already bought a house on the outskirts of the village, and he planned to travel from there every day, which left her even more stunned, and she wondered how long exactly he was planning to keep an eye on her. Later that night, Elizabeth was putting all the children to sleep, and she shared with one of the girls how even though the royal castle seemed all sparkly, it was wrapped in jealousy and envy, and it was a really scary place. The kid asked her if there was no prince for her in that place, and in response, she just chuckled and told her that her prince was not there. But then suddenly, for some reason, Leonid's face appeared in her mind, and she herself had no idea why that happened. Speaking of which, Leonid was back at his new home, and even at night, he was training his sword skills, thinking to himself that he had finally made it all the way out there, and on top of that, he was also able to talk to Elizabeth and taste her cooking as well. He wondered if by doing that, he had actually stepped up from being one of her acquaintances to a friend. As he was thinking about her, her face appeared in his mind, and then suddenly he got really shy, which made his face turn completely red, and he just chopped down a big tree in front of him as a response to that. Turns out he was actually in love with Elizabeth, and that's why he was following her all the way out to a remote village. The scene then shifted to the manor of the Count of Cloeras, and there was a man named Christart. Just 5 years ago, he had inherited the title of the Count from his father, and currently, at the age of 26 years old, he was quite happy with himself and believed that he was doing well. Recently, his domain has gained 2 new inhabitants. One of them was, of course, the former daughter of a duke, Elizabeth, who had been banished from the neighboring kingdom. When she had first come to him to introduce herself, she did not really seem as villainous as the rumors about her made her out to be, which was really surprising to him. And then, there was the other inhabitant, Leonid. Just as he was thinking about him, Leonid paid him a visit and barged right into his office. Christart teased him for coming in without even asking, and Leonid decided to just leave then, but Christart stopped him. On a serious note, he reminded him that since he was the head knight, his status was pretty much equal to a count, and that's why it was necessary for him to learn to mind his manners. With that said, now that he was there, he asked him if he had any report or any news about the barn. Leonid told him that he was only there to thank him for providing him a horse, and, as for the barn next to the pen, he had already fixed it, so there was nothing else to report in that matter. Seeing the way he was speaking to him, Christart could not help but think that he really does suck at conversation. Putting that aside, he then asked him if he was serious about moving to this place, given that he even brought his beloved horse here. Leonid told him that he was planning to stay there at least for a year. He was quite surprised to hear that and commented that there were indeed benefits to him having a superior record and no sick days, since the King of Moors had allowed him to take an entire year off now. He then noticed a scar on his shoulder and reminisced how the two of them used to see each other almost every day when they were younger. But now that they had both grown up and were busy in their own paths, it had been 5 years since they were last able to have a friendly chat like this. Leonid did not really remember how long it had been, and Christart reminded him that it was right after he became a count 5 years ago, when the sacred lion's sword gallantly came to protect him from the bandits. But again, Leonid did not remember any of that, and for some reason, Christart wasn't too surprised. 5 years ago, he was on a mission to get rid of some bandits, and Leonid had saved him from near certain death. The scar on his neck was a wound from that same incident, and whenever Christart sees that, he gets reminded of his debt to him. That's why, to this day, he wanted to repay him in any way that he could and wanted to give him a hand, but Leonid was making it really complicated for him. Since they were on that topic, he further informed him that there had actually been a string of small burglaries in the village. As soon as he heard that, Leonid asked him for more information, like how many people there were and where their base was, to which he answered that there were only about 5 people, and they did not really have a hideout. However, since he was on a vacation there anyway, he asked him if he could look into this by patrolling a little. Without any hesitation, he agreed to do that in order to ensure the citizens' safety. Of course, Christart already knew the real reason why he was all the way out here and told him that he should actually try to take that suggestion he gave to him as advice, because then that way he might actually have an excuse to run into her naturally. However, Leonid still did not admit that, and with a plain expression he questioned him about who he was talking about. The two of them just stared at each other silently, and Christart began to wonder if he was seriously thinking that nobody had noticed his actions and his little secret, even though it was all as plain as day. Leonid then decided to take his leave, and once again he thanked him for taking care of his horse. But as he was leaving, Christart stopped him and told him that he had actually heard that the nun who just recently arrived in the village likes horses a lot. Leonid continued to play dumb, and once again with a serious expression, he questioned why he was telling him all that when it had nothing to do with him. He slammed the door, got on his horse, and left the manor, while Christart just watched him leave. Seeing the way he reacted to everything he told him, he realized that he was going to have to put way more effort into helping him out. But whatever the case, he actually looked forward to seeing how things would turn out between the eccentric nun, who was also the former daughter of a duke, and this blunt and strong head knight. Coming back to Elizabeth, she was out there delivering bread to an old lady and reminded her to make sure that she eats that bread within 2 days. The lady complimented her, saying that her bread was indeed very soft and delicious, but it was a shame that it does not last very long and expires in just 2 days. Whatever the case, she thanked her, and Elizabeth promised to bring her some more. With that said, she took her leave. She was filled with joy after hearing the old lady praise her bread, and she also agreed that it was too bad she could not keep it fresh for long, but it is what it is, and she decided to head to the next house. However, just then, Leonid appeared right in front of her, riding his horse. With a menacing face, he told her to watch where she was going, otherwise she would get kicked by the horse. She just stood there, completely stunned. She could not understand what he was doing there all of a sudden and began to wonder if he was stalking her or something. He got off from his horse and told her to hop on, but she did not really want to because she was still scared of him, so he just decided to walk with her. As he was on a patrol, she understood that he really was tailing her. As the two of them walked together in awkward silence, he just continued to stare at her while she, on the other hand, was questioning everything about this situation and was already starting to miss her carefree life. She then looked at his horse, and she could tell that his horse was very wise and strong as well. She asked him what its name was, and he told her that it was Floristano. She liked that name a lot and decided to call it Flor. While they were on that subject, he also said to her that she could call him Leo as well. She got a little confused hearing that from him and stated that, in her position, she should refer to him as Sir Leonid. However, he told her that he was on a vacation right now, so there was no need to be so formal. Since he was insisting that much, she agreed to call him by his name, Leonid. But that's it. He was happy to hear that, but of course, his expression did not change at all. They then arrived at a bakehouse, and Elizabeth was preparing herself to confront someone. A maid stood at the front door who apparently already knew her and informed her that the lady was not going to accept any visitors today. Elizabeth requested her to let her go inside, but the maid refused and asked her to leave. Then another maid also came outside and told her that the young lady was not feeling well. That's why she could not meet her. Elizabeth really wanted to see her, and she tried to get in, but the two maids were defending the door and were not allowing her to get even near it. She asked Leonid to help her open this door, and as soon as he got involved, he pulled the door with just a single hand while the other maid was still hanging on to the handle, casually clearing the way for her, which left her quite surprised. Without wasting any time, she ran inside. Going up the stairs, she contemplated that even though it was very scary when he used to chase her through the palace, now that he was on her side, she admitted he was rather convenient and was more like a sacred lion door stopper. But putting that aside, she went up to the young lady Charlotte's room and, knocking on her door, she requested her to open the door as she just wanted to talk to her for a minute. But then she noticed that the door was actually unlocked, so she decided to slowly go in, clarifying that she was not going to harm her and was on her side. However, the moment she entered, Charlotte was right there, waiting for her with a crossbow in hand and aimed straight at her. Before Elizabeth could even react, she shot the arrow at her, and there was no time for her to get out of the way. But just then, Leonid appeared and he caught the arrow with his bare hand before it could hit her. He asked her if she was okay, and still terrified, she told him that she was. However, it turns out that it was just a toy, and Elizabeth took a sigh of relief. But of course, Leonid was not going to forgive her just because it was a toy, and breaking the arrow in two, he questioned the young lady if she had any idea what harm it could have caused if it were to hit them in the wrong place. He also made it very clear that the minute someone draws a weapon on the battlefield against him, they instantly become his enemy, which left Charlotte and even Elizabeth completely terrified. She could not believe that he was not showing any mercy to even a child. But then there was also the fact that he had just caught a flying arrow with his bare hands, and she realized he had some seriously impressive physical abilities. Charlotte, on the other hand, started to justify her actions by blaming them and told them that it was their fault for coming in uninvited. She wanted them to leave at once, and Elizabeth requested her to just listen to her out, as they were finally able to talk face to face. However, she already knew that she was the famous former Duke's daughter who had now become a sister, and she was in no mood to talk to her at all. Elizabeth briefed her that she was there to invite her to the Sunday Mass, but she did not want to go anywhere with her, and mentioned that she had become the laughing stock of the entire village. Elizabeth tried to clarify that it was nothing like that, and that they were all actually waiting for her, but again, she refused to go. Turns out, Charlotte was just a 14-year-old little girl, and the daughter of a successful businessman who became a baron and joined the ranks of the nobility. However, her naive personality was deemed unbecoming of a noble household, so that's why she was shunned by her family and was sent to this same countryside with the excuse that she needed to rest and recover from an illness, when in reality, they were all simply trying to get rid of a nuisance. Charlotte was convinced that she really was sick and that she needed to rest and recover if she wanted to go back home. That's why she did not want to come outside of her room, because she wanted to rest. Elizabeth pointed out that it had already been more than a year, and that the doctors had also said that she was completely fine, but the young lady just refused to believe anyone. So she then asked her if the rank of a noble was not as important to her as it was to her parents, and Charlotte responded that it was not important for her. However, for some reason, everyone had changed so suddenly, and she could not understand why. Elizabeth assured her that it was not her fault at all, and as she opened up the curtains to let some light in, she suggested that while they were in the village, they should at least try to have some fun and hang out a little more, since there were so many things they could talk about. But obviously, Charlotte was still very scared, and she asked her to close the curtains, as she wanted to just stay in the dark. Elizabeth refused to do that, telling her that the sunlight was good for her body, and if she did not get enough, her legs would get weak. She then turned to Leonid and asked him if she could borrow his horse, and of course, he wasn't really going to say no to her, so he just nodded. A few moments later, she finally convinced Charlotte to come out of her room, and the maids were simply emotional seeing the young lady finally step out of her room. Leonid asked her if she was actually going to ride a horse in that dress of hers, and she agreed that he did have a point there. So she just pulled up her dress and folded it so that it did not get stuck in anything and hopped on the horse, while his face just turned completely red seeing her like that. He then helped Charlotte get on the horse, and she felt really embarrassed and kept shouting how it was very improper for a lady like her. But Elizabeth assured her that no one would even care since it was the countryside. With that said, they moved forward, and she was still terrified, thinking that she would fall off from the horse. But then Elizabeth told her to just open her eyes and look at the view in front of her. When she did, and as she saw the vast plain fields, she was simply amazed, and all she could say was, "Wow." Elizabeth asked her if she enjoyed the view, but she yet again got back to her arrogant self and questioned her if she was trying to butter her up for some ulterior motives. With a pure smile on her face, she explained to her that she was not planning to do anything like that, and she just wanted her to have a good time, that's all. She brought up how the two of them were finally able to free themselves from the obligations of nobility, and they could do whatever they wanted now that they were far away from the noble's watchful eyes. So she just wanted to make the most of this situation by doing whatever they wanted. Although she did still have a scary set of eyes staring after her, it did not matter. Charlotte also pointed out that the family of a duke was completely different from that of a newly recognized baron. However, Elizabeth told her that they were still the same, and that's why, no matter what happens, she did not want to leave her alone inside those four walls, which left her speechless. Then, a few moments later, they found a spot to camp, and Elizabeth proudly showcased all the bread that she had baked for them, while Leonid and Charlotte seemed a bit suspicious of it. She did not want to eat it because of how weird it looked, but Elizabeth insisted that she at least give it a bite and try it out. In her mind, she completely understood where they were coming from, since people in this world still were not used to the concept of sweet buns and side dish breads that the people of Japan were so proud of. Since nuts were very expensive here, she could not get peanut butter, so she used some of the church's empty land as a garden and grew her own, which saved her costs. As for the potatoes, they were really cheap and plentiful, so there was no problem there. Lastly, she had also used some burdock roots and carrots in those sandwiches, which, even though they might not look so appetizing, were very healthy. It was just the peanuts that were the hardest ingredient to come by, even though they were really easy to obtain in her previous life. Now that she was growing her own peanuts in the garden, she also noticed that after the peanut flower had bloomed, the plant sends vine-like tendrils down into the earth, which grow and become seeds with shells. Although for her, it was a bit scary to think of, she brushed it off as something that was just a part of nature. Moving on to the next step, the process of making peanut butter itself wasn't that difficult, but it just took some time. The trick was to catch them at the right time before they got burnt, and then once they cooled down, just remove the skins and mash the nuts. Then she sautéed the nuts with the thick skin still on, and just continued to mash them again and again. Once it turned into a paste, she added sugar, and just like that, she was able to make homemade peanut butter. Coming back, she noticed the expression on Leonid's face, and she could tell that he probably wanted to try some of these breads as well. So she offered him some to try, and he went straight for the one that looked the most weird. He started eating it, and Charlotte was already in doubt about whether that one was even edible, so she asked him how it was, but he completely ignored her and was simply thinking about something in his head. She then grabbed a bread for herself, the one that looked the most harmless and normal, and that was the peanut-like bread with a devilish flavor. The moment she took a bite, she was amazed at how delicious it was. It was really soft, with a delicious sweet stuffing inside, and Elizabeth was just glad to see that she loved it. But then there was Leonid, who was just munching down his bread, and although she was pretty sure that it wouldn't taste as bad, seeing his face, which looked as scary as ever, she wasn't really sure if he even liked it. She wondered what he would look like if he were to actually smile, and she actually wanted to try and put a happy expression on his face. Of course, she did not want to do it in any weird way. She just wanted to do it as it was her nature, being a former event planner and all that, or at least that's what she kept telling herself. But to do that, she first needed to smooth out that wrinkle which was carved down between his eyebrows. As the two of them finished their food, they both thanked her, and she asked Charlotte if the bread suited her taste, to which she answered that it did and admitted that it was not bad. Putting that aside, she asked Elizabeth if it was all right if she went to Mass on the coming Sunday. She was filled with joy hearing that from her and assured her that it was completely fine. As a matter of fact, everyone there had been wanting to meet her. Not only that, after that Mass, she also wanted her to accompany her in the kitchen because, together with her, she actually wanted to work on making food for the church bazaar that was in 2 weeks. Since she was here in this village now, she did not want to give anyone a reason to say that the sisters' treats were always the same, and that's why she wanted to experiment. Hearing all that, Charlotte just chuckled and complimented her that she was indeed a very wonderful nun. It made her really happy, and going a little out of character, she asked her if she truly thought that it suited her, which left Charlotte a little confused. She told her that she was only complimenting her. The kid switched back to her arrogant self as well and taunted her not to get ahead of herself just because she could make some nice weird bread, while Leonid just stood there watching them argue so childishly, and for the first time ever, there was a little smile on his face. Later at night, going back to the church, Elizabeth contemplated how, in any world, a person's greatest pleasure was food. Thanks to the plentiful ingredients and the excess of church funds, she was able to work on creating more types of dishes. With the knowledge that she held from her previous life, she wanted to come up with things that the children and the villagers could enjoy, all so that she could put a smile on their faces. Therefore, she was also determined to make the church bazaar a big success. Meanwhile, outside the church, there was a group of shady men hiding in the woods, discussing that the church had been spending a lot of money recently ever since a former noble had arrived there, so they planned to take advantage of the upcoming festival and steal everything from the church. Later on, she paid a visit to Hobelt the blacksmith to collect the utensil she had requested him to create. Even though he did not really know what its purpose was, and why she wanted it out of copper instead of iron, he made it precisely as she wanted it to be, and she thanked him for that. Furthermore, he also handed her the handheld pick and brush that she had asked for, and she was really grateful for his help. With that said, he called out the man behind her and told him that his weapon was ready as well. When she turned around, she was shocked to see that Leonid was standing right behind her before she even realized it. She questioned him about when he got there, and he just answered that he arrived just now. She also asked him what he was doing at a blacksmith, but from his perspective, it was quite normal for him to be there, as he was only there to collect his weapon. The odd one out was actually her, and he asked her why she was there, to which she replied that she was there for the same reason as him as well. She was there to collect her weapons, and as she held those tiny items in her hand, he just stood there confused, wondering what sort of weapons she was referring to. Putting all that aside, Hobolt brought up that his order was not really a new one, since he just wanted his sword repaired, and he told him to be more careful using that thing, as he had already fixed it countless times now. As for Elizabeth, he promised to send her tools via the cart by evening. However, she assured him that he did not need to do that, and that she planned to carry them back herself. Besides, she could not wait to try them out anyway. She tried to pick it up, but of course it was a bit too heavy for her, and she was struggling. So Leonid came in to lend her a hand, and just picked that thing up with one hand. She tried to stop him, saying that they should get a cart, but he just walked ahead and did not need the cart. Hobolt also started laughing and admitted that even he could barely lift that thing with two hands, but then there was him, just carrying it like it was nothing, and he commented that he was one reliable bodyguard to have, while Elizabeth felt that he was actually the opposite of a bodyguard. Still, she went after him and thought to herself that even though she had no idea what this super-strong head knight was thinking, she believed that as long as she did not act weird, her existence here should not be a problem to him. Besides, since he was actually coming in handy in moments like this, she was actually a little glad that he was there. Later, after dropping off her items at the church, she thanked him for carrying all that, and with this tool, she was sure the Bazaar would be a success. He asked her if this was the last thing she needed, and she shared with him that there were still some things that were hard to get in the village. So tomorrow, she was planning to go to the port and finish up some quick shopping. He asked her if she was going there alone, and she told him that it was not like she was going to run away or anything. It was just a day trip. However, he remembered what Christart had informed him about recent bandit sightings, and with that in mind, he decided to come along with her. She tried to avoid that, telling him that she was planning to leave early in the morning, at 5 in the morning, but he just agreed to see her at sharp 5 a.m., saying that he was already used to it. Without even listening to her, he just left, while she stood there, trying to comprehend what just happened, and how it came down to this. But looking on the bright side, now that he was accompanying her, she thought that he could come in handy by carrying her purchases, so it wasn't all that bad. Later that night, arriving back at his home, he decided to head to bed early so that he could protect Elizabeth tomorrow morning, no matter what happened. As he lay down on his bed, he could not stop thinking about how he would actually be going on a trip to the port alone with her, and because of that, he could not sleep at all. The more he tried to sleep, the more his eyes refused to shut, and in the end, being unable to sleep, he just gave up and decided to train until it was time to head out. He went back outside, and he could not understand why this was happening to him, because up until now, no matter how important the mission was the next day, there was never a time when he was not able to go to sleep before. Nonetheless, he picked up his sword and was about to start training when suddenly he heard something deep in the woods. He listened closely, and just from the sound, he could tell that inside that forest, there were 3 people. They were trying to disguise their presence by softening their footsteps, and they were not even carrying a light when it was so late at night. Considering all that, he was certain that it was the group of bandits. He was indeed right, as the 3 bandits inside the forest discussed that the nearby house was completely empty, and since that was the case, they planned to go for the church, where they would hold the sisters hostage. While they were at it, they could also plunder the count's manor. One of them laughed menacingly and commented that while they were going for the money, they could have some fun with the sisters as well. Just then, Leonid appeared right behind them and questioned them about which sister they were talking about. The bandits panicked and started running away between the trees to escape him. One of them even mocked him for bringing such a big sword into woods like these, where there was no room for him to swing it around because of all the tall trees. However, he just started slicing down every single tree that came in his way with just a single swing, and he continued to run after them. The bandits' path got blocked by all the chopped trees, and at last they had nowhere left to run. The bandits finally realized that the man in front of them, carrying such a huge sword and having red hair and golden eyes, was none other than the sacred lion's sword. One of them once again tried to run away, and Leonid was about to stop him. But then he got an idea and allowed him to run. The bandit, terrified for his life, ran back to his hideout, which was a cave, and in there were two more of them. He informed them that they had been caught and suggested that they should split up and run. They asked him if it was a group of soldiers, and he told them that it was just one terrifying guy. But then he noticed that the two of them started trembling, and he heard something behind him. He had led Leonid right to their hiding place, and all three of them were terrified as he started beating all of them up. Later in the morning, Elizabeth was almost ready, and she contemplated how it had been a while since she had gone out in clothes other than her church ones, which made her wonder if she was going a bit overly dressed. Putting that aside, she had a feeling that Leonid might have already shown up 2 hours early because of how punctual he was. Thinking that he might even scold her for getting late, she decided to head out without any delay. Little did she know, while she was getting ready for this date, he was out there fighting off the bandits threatening the church. Meanwhile, Leonid had captured all the bandits alive, and he turned them in to Christart, who assured him to leave the rest to him. He was just about to discuss his payment. However, Leonid was already in a hurry, and he just called his horse and dashed away without even listening to him. Coming back to Elizabeth, she was starting to get really tired of waiting, and even though he had told her that he would meet her right at 5 in the morning, it was already 9, and he had not showed up at all. She herself did not know why she was still waiting for him when she should have just gone ahead even if he was 5 minutes late, but now, at this time, there was no way she could catch the morning market. She had thought that he would be a man who values time a lot, but she was really disappointed to see how careless he was. Just then, he finally arrived there on his horse, and she started scolding him for being so late. He apologized to her, and she questioned him if he had fallen asleep again after waking up. But he just stood there silently and could not even look her in the eye. She wondered why he was not even trying to make up an excuse and told him that she had been foolishly waiting for him for the past 4 hours. He was surprised to hear that she actually waited for him, and when he asked her why, she said that she always keeps her promises, but it did not matter now anyway, since they could not go to the morning market anymore, and catching the midday market was also tough at this time. As soon as he heard that, he grabbed her arm and asked her to get on the horse. He was certain that if they hurry, they would be able to go to the midday market, and so he dashed ahead on his horse at full speed. Elizabeth was not ready for that, and she got scared, and then, before she even realized, she was holding on to him and had gotten a bit too close. She got a little embarrassed and tried to explain herself, but he, on the other hand, simply told her to hold on to him tightly and also not try to talk. Otherwise, she might bite her tongue, and she agreed. As the two of them charged ahead, she was amazed to see how fast Florestina was going, and at this pace, she also had a feeling that they would be able to make it in time. A few moments later, they finally made it to the port, and luckily, the market was still open. She turned to Leonid and said to him that, as for his punishment for being so late, he would now have to join her in shopping, as she planned to do a lot of shopping from the market, and he agreed to do that without any questions. They began to buy a bunch of different things, and then they arrived at a stall from where she wanted to buy some sugar. However, seeing Elizabeth, the vendor refused and said that he does not sell sugar to commoners, but then Leonid showed him the pure silver bracelet on his hand, which had the Knight of Lion embedded on it, and questioned him if that was enough. The vendor ate back his words and politely asked her how many bags of sugar she needed. After that, she went to buy an octopus from the fisherman, and one man was ready to sell it to her, but he was curious to know what she wanted to do with it, since he was just about to eat it as well. All of a sudden, the octopus jumped out of the pot and clung to Leonid's face. He pulled it away using sheer force, while Elizabeth requested him to be gentle with it, as she wanted to take it back home alive. However, when he removed it from his face, the octopus had left its tentacle marks all over his face, and seeing that, she could not help but just laugh, as she had never thought that there would come a day when she would be able to see the great het knight with such a funny face, while he just stood there feeling a little embarrassed. Later in the evening, they were finally done with their shopping and sat together to enjoy the view of the ocean. She thanked him for everything he did for her today, carrying all the luggage around from the vendors and all that. She mentioned that he must be feeling very frustrated since he had come there just to observe her but ended up helping her, and confused, he asked her what she meant by that. She told him that she already knew what was going on in his head, that he probably thought that she would probably escape from this country through the port. However, she clarified that she had no intention of running away from this place, because her current life was very much fun. Of course, that was not what he was thinking at all, and he was about to explain that to her, but he decided to let it go for now and just remain silent. Later at night, coming back to the church, Elizabeth was just double-checking all the things that she needed for the event, when suddenly Christart knocked on her door and came to meet her. She was surprised to see that the feudal lord himself was paying her a visit, and she asked him what he was doing there so late at night, to which he replied that he was just there to confirm from her if there was anything missing from the bazaar. She thanked him for showing such concern and assured him that she had already bought everything together with the head knight. He was glad to hear that and also mentioned that he was very happy to see Leonid was adapting there nicely. However, Elizabeth was still very much annoyed with him and said that she was not going to wait for him ever again. Christart had already expected that she must be thinking like that, and confused, she asked him what he meant by that. So he explained to her that the other night, Leonid had discovered a group of bandits in the forest, and he was actually dealing with them until morning. He was successfully able to wipe out both the bandits and their hideout, and because of him, they could have the bazaar without any threats or worries. She was really shocked to hear all that from him, and could not believe that Leonid did not even mention anything about that to her, even though they spent the whole day together, and Christart simply told her that he was just that kind of a person. That's why he was leaving him to her. She then went up to Leonid and started scolding him, saying that he should have at least shared with her what he was doing in the night, but then she looked closely at him, and it turns out he was fast asleep already. She wanted him to at least appear as proud of his achievement, and more importantly, she poked at his forehead, hoping for him to at least stop having these angry wrinkles on his forehead while he was sleeping. But then, all of a sudden, he woke up because of her poking, and because he opened his eyes so suddenly, she got scared and started screaming. Confused, he asked her if there were any bandits, and she just told him that he should not wake up so suddenly like that. He realized that he had actually fallen asleep before he even knew, but then, since Elizabeth was on the ground, he accidentally ended up looking between her legs and turned completely red. She saw that and smacked his head into the ground, questioning him where the hell he was staring at. He continued to apologize to her, explaining that it was just an accident and he was only looking up front, but she just kept yelling at him. Meanwhile, Christart, who was on his way out, saw the two of them behaving like that and was shocked to see that even the head knight was bowing in front of a sister. He could not believe that that's how the two of them were interacting, even though he had told them to get along, and he realized that he might have to help them a little more, while the two of them just continued to argue. A few days later, it was finally the day of the bazaar, and with full energy, Elizabeth was ready to begin this event. The bazaar was underway, and everyone seemed to be enjoying it a lot. There was a bunch of different food she had made, and even Charlotte had come to the event. A boy was passing by, and Elizabeth called him out, telling him that this time's bazaar was a little different from before. As soon as he saw her charming face, the boy insisted his mom try out the food, and she was really happy to see that. Turns out that the bazaar was a type of event that happens in the church once every 3 months. The sisters make sweets, the villagers sell bazaar products, and some merchants also come to set up their market. However, now that she was there, she was not going to let anybody say that the church had poor mannerisms, and she was determined to showcase her capability as an event planner from a different world. Hilda was also making cotton candy, and the children had no idea what that was, so everyone ran to it because it looked like clouds. When they tasted it, they absolutely loved how sweet and soft it was, while Elizabeth felt proud because, just like she had expected, children always love cotton candy no matter which world they are in. Furthermore, she called for every child's attention and showed them the popcorns that popped right in front of them, and the moment they saw that, they lost their minds because it looked almost magical, and it popped like flowers, while she, on the other hand, yet again felt very proud of herself. Meanwhile, Charlotte had also set up a candy stall, and Lucinda and Roxanne were buttering her up, saying that the candy looked like something out of this world. She even pointed them out and told them that they did not need to be so formal with her, and they apologized for that. Seeing all that and how much fun everyone was having, Elizabeth felt really satisfied, and she just stood there, taking that moment in. Leonid then called her out and informed her that the copper plate was ready and warmed up, so it was finally time for her to put on the main event, and she went straight to her stall. She requested everyone to gather around and told them she was now going to make a very special dish for all of them. Everyone got curious, and looking closely, they wondered what it was while she went ahead and poured a mixture on the sizzling copper plate. It was a mixture of flour, water, and eggs mixed with chopped green onions, and then lastly, she added some octopus pieces in there as well. The kids had no idea what it was and asked her what that ingredient was, but she simply smiled and said that it was a secret because, in her mind, she also knew that if she were to tell them that it was an octopus, they probably wouldn't eat this. Once the mixture was hot and firm, she showed off her secret technique, the 1,000 hands of cannon, to make the mixture into several balls, and it just left everyone absolutely amazed. The trick to having a perfect circle was to continue to move it frequently, and that was something she had mastered fully. With that done, the balls were ready, and she handed them over to Leonid to do the rest. He added some sauce, vegetables, spices, and a little bit of honey to it, then put green laver as a substitute for sea lettuce, and lastly he added mayonnaise, egg oil, and salt to it. Finally, the dish was ready, and he handed it over to the children. Meanwhile, Christart was also there, and he was simply observing him. It was quite weird to see the head knight sprinkling sea lettuce on a dish, while his butler could tell that things seemed to be going rather well for him. Just then, a man in a cat costume came to greet him and thanked him for taking some time out to visit them. He politely asked him who he was, and the cat introduced himself as Priest Moritz, the head of the church, which left him very shocked. A couple of children heard the shift in his voice, which made them a bit scared, and the sister reminded him that he was supposed to be acting like a cat. So, going back to his cute voice, he once again thanked the feudal lord and told him to enjoy his time there, while Christart, on the other hand, was beginning to understand that some people were also making sacrifices for the success of the bazaar. Coming back to Elizabeth, she was done with the first wave, and there was still a lot to be done till the end of the event, but first she handed Leonid his portion of the dish, which she had specially made for him since he was helping her after all. He thanked her for that, and she warned him to be careful with it since it was still very hot. However, before she could even finish that sentence, he just chomped down a ball, and it was too late now. His whole face turned completely red because of how hot it was, and she could not believe that he had just eaten it whole so quickly. She told him to spit it out at once, otherwise he would end up burning his tongue. However, he did not want to spit out anything that she had made specially for him, so he just held on to it and finally ate it, while she, on the other hand, remembered that he does have a habit of hogging down any food that he sees almost instantly. She suggested he take a break for a while and eat the rest of it slowly inside the church. And while he was at it, she also requested him to bring the additional ingredients from the kitchen on his way back, and he agreed. Back inside the church, he sat by himself and ate the rest of the dish, slowly this time, and was really impressed by how good it was. He wondered what it really was and how it was made, but just then he saw the additional ingredients that Elizabeth had asked for, and on the side, there were some leftover sliced-up octopus tentacles, and he finally understood where the octopus went. He came back outside and saw Christart having a chat with Elizabeth, complimenting her that this bazaar was a great success, all thanks to her, and she stated that it was only possible because of everybody else who helped her. But then he also added that ever since she had come here to Norcia, or even to the town of Clolaris itself, he could tell that the town had changed in a good way. She was flustered to hear that from him, and replied that she just wanted everyone to have fun, and he told her that she did not have to be so modest. But then he saw Leonid just staring at him dead in the eye with a menacing look, and he wondered if he was actually thinking of killing him or something. With that said, he was about to take his leave from her when, all of a sudden, the tent behind them became loose and was about to fall right on their heads. However, Leonid stepped in like a hero, and holding Elizabeth in his arms, he protected her from getting hit and held back the entire tent with just a single hand. For a moment she was left speechless, and she thanked him for saving her. But of course, having zero communication skills, he stepped back, and the best he could come up with was that next time he would make sure to make a stronger tent. The two of them just got back to their work in awkward silence, while completely forgetting about Christart, who was also right there under a cloth, and could not believe how oblivious the two of them were. After that, later in the evening, everyone went back home, and with that, the bazaar ended in a great success. The people who came to the bazaar went home with their stomachs full, and the merchants who set up their stalls also profited a lot as well. In the end, Leonid and Elizabeth just looked at each other, and she smiled at him, which made him a little shy, and he just looked away, while the rest of the sisters could clearly tell what was going on between the two of them. The scene then shifted to Moer's royal palace, and Princess Rosetta was in her room, alone and getting bored. Just then she heard something outside, and when she went to the balcony, her charming prince, Prince Claude, was right there, and he had come to pick her up. The two lovebirds could not live without each other, and she straight up jumped from her balcony right into his arms. They could not wait any longer and decided to get married right away. However, since there were many who were opposed to the idea of their marriage, she suggested a place in the Ramazer kingdom where they could register their marriage without their parents' concerns, and that place was the Nortia church. The prince did not ask any questions and decided to head straight to that place by carriage, and with that, the two lovebirds prepared themselves to head to Nortia church and get married. The next morning, the two of them were already on their way to the church in a carriage, and when she woke up, her prince wished her a very good morning. Excited, she asked him if they had reached the church, and he told her that they had not quite yet. However, they had crossed the border and were going to be out of the woods soon. The only thing he hoped for was to not encounter any bandits along the way. But then came the naive princess, and holding his hand, she assured him that he did not need to worry, as there was nothing that could get in the way of their love, and he was really happy to hear that. Back at the church, Elizabeth was doing her routine tasks, polishing the statue of the goddess. Apparently, the religion of this world, or at least the main one in Rameza, and where she had been banished to in Moyers, worshipped the goddess Helvela. The statue of the goddess that was in front of her held lilies, which were said to turn into a sword that she used to protect the continent. That's why the people offer up their prayers, speak to her of their daily doings, hope to receive blessings for newborns, and also hold memorials for the dead. The priest then informed all of them that it was nearly time for the arrival of their guests, and the sisters wondered who the happy couple was this time around who wanted to get married. However, Elizabeth pointed out that it did not really matter who they were, because their speciality there was actually elopements. It turned out that in this world, it was impossible to get married if the couple did not have the approval of their parents, and as a matter of fact, if the parents approved, someone could even be married off to someone despite their own feelings, which was most common in women's cases, since there were a lot of marriages that were only for political convenience. To get married, one must say their vows with the goddess as witness and have the clergyman write up a certificate. Then after that, the couple needed to perform a ceremony in front of their parents who had given their approval. However, there was a clever way around these two conditions and still follow the rules. In the kingdom of Moyers, it was mandatory to fulfill both conditions. However, in the kingdom of Rameza, where the Nortia church was, the second condition was optional. Hence, couples who could not get the approval of their parents would hold their wedding over here and get married. But more importantly, the eloping couple that was soon going to arrive there was going to be Elizabeth's first as a nun here, and she was really excited to be a part of it. A part of her also wondered who the lucky couple was going to be to walk down the red carpet. A nobility, or perhaps a merchant's daughter and a boy who handles cargo. But whatever the case, just the idea of marriage was very romantic to her, and so, no matter who they were, she was determined to do her best as a sister and give them a beautiful wedding ceremony. Just then, someone knocked on the door and stated that they were the ones who had sent the message a few days ago about the marriage. Everyone got excited since the couple was finally there, and the priest asked Elizabeth to open the door. She happily ran to the door, thinking that just on the other side, there were two people who were going to pledge their undying love to each other, and she could not wait to meet them. But then, when she opened the door, she saw Princess Rosetta and Prince Claude, and she realized that it was her past that had come to her doorstep. At first, she double-checked if she was seeing things right by closing the door and then opening it again, and when she realized that it was real, both parties were left completely stunned. Confused, the princess questioned her about what she was doing there, and Elizabeth reminded her that it was her father who had decided to banish her. The stupid princess still did not understand what she was saying and questioned her if she had come all this way just to interfere with her plans, while Elizabeth, on the other hand, was losing her mind, thinking why things were turning out like this when she was peacefully enjoying her life here. The princess kept on going, saying that the love between her and Claude would overcome anything in its way, while Elizabeth did not give a damn about them and their love story, as she had already moved on from it a long time ago. Since she was banished, she never really got to know which end of the straw the princess got, but she had never thought that it would be Prince Claude. He was the son of a former concubine, so basically he was like an older brother figure to Rosetta. He was not related by blood, and she could not really remember seeing him in the game either. But then she recalled that there was a hidden character that was only unlocked after all the other routes were cleared, and she guessed he must be it. Now, seeing the two of them so deeply in love with each other, she admitted that the princess was actually thicker than she had thought. In her former life, she had only managed to clear 3 of the main characters, so she never really got to experience what the love and passion between the two of them would look like, but from the looks of it, it was quite strong. However, whatever the case, the fact remained that the two of them had come to her for their marriage, so she was mature enough to put all the history aside and treat them as two valued guests of the church. She welcomed them both in and asked if they were ready for their ceremony, with the goddess Helvela as their witness, and the two of them cheerfully said yes. As they entered inside, the children welcomed them both by giving them flowers, and Rosetta loved that a lot. Elizabeth was glad to see that the princess was at least nice at heart, and she understood that she must have gotten the wrong idea seeing her there. With that said, the head sister offered to give an explanation about the ceremony to the prince, and he listened. She explained to him that a wedding ceremony was a very important event, and although elopement may have speed as its priority, she wanted them to have a memorable ceremony with whatever limited time and budget the church had. She actually hoped that someday Norshid Church's elopement weddings could go big in the wedding industry. With that in mind, she asked the prince what kind of ceremony they had in mind, to which he replied that he just wanted something that Rosetta could remember for the rest of her life, with the limited budget that he had right now. So she briefed him about the gorgeous and fast and easy plan, which was specially created for their high-class guests. It involved pretty much everything they could ask for, like a one-night stay, their marriage certificate prepared by the following morning, and most importantly, to set aside their fears. The church had also asked the whole village to cooperate and identify any unknown person the moment they came in, so that they could rush with the wedding part. The two lovebirds absolutely loved that plan, and without a second thought, they accepted the gorgeous and fast and easy plan. Hild and Elizabeth looked at each other and simply smirked, as they were successfully able to sell an expensive plan to them and make a big bag of cash with ease. Elizabeth signaled the priest that they were ready, and the priest presented them with a wide range of rings they could choose from, saying that these were all his pride and joy that he had made himself. Rosetta found all the rings extremely cute, especially the ones with the big jewels, and the priest was really selling it to her, as he offered to inscribe the couple's names on the rings and stated that these rings came in a set, so there was one for the groom as well. Of course, she loved that idea. With the rings decided, the priest went ahead to make the final adjustments for them, while Hild made a full bill for Claude to review their order. But then, when he saw the total bill, it left him really stunned, as it turned out to be quite more expensive than he had thought. But then she adjusted all the various discounts they were ready to give them and even added another discount because they were acquaintances of Elizabeth, and he was surprised to see how much of a discount he was getting. He thanked her for providing them with all this, and the head sister assured him that they always try to avoid placing a burden on their guests. But of course, in reality, they were just doing business, as they knew full well that if they started with a cheap price, people would think their service was cheap. That's why they set it high at the start, and then slowly lowered it in the name of discounts. With all that formality out of the way, Elizabeth offered them a chance to refresh themselves with a celebratory gift of apple cider from Norshid Church. The sisters brought in a big pyramid of glasses, and Elizabeth poured the drink from the top like a fountain, which left Rosetta absolutely amazed because of how elegant it was. Of course, it wasn't anything expensive like champagne. However, even cheap beverages could look very fancy depending on their presentation. And that's exactly what they did there. Clearly, it seemed to work, as the couple cheerfully enjoyed their drink in the name of a blessing directly from the goddess just for them. Elizabeth was happy to see that so far, their plan for nobility was going exactly as expected. Even though their guests turned out to actually be nobility, all that was left was to make sure that their memories of this special event outweighed the price. But then, all of a sudden, someone opened the main door, which left everyone a bit startled. However, it turned out to be just Leonid, and he reported that no intruders or pursuers had been detected around the village. Elizabeth was glad to see that it was just him and not an enemy, and she apologized to her guests on his behalf for scaring them like that, assuring them that he was simply cooperating with them to guard the church. But then something clicked in her mind, and she realized where this was going. Suddenly, Prince Claude bowed down in front of him and formally greeted the head knight, the sacred lion. Rosetta also recognized him, and she was surprised to see what he was doing there, as she had heard that he left the castle a while ago. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, on the other hand, realized the situation they were in now, and it was not good at all. As a matter of fact, this was the worst possible outcome that could happen right now. In simple words, what these two lovebirds were doing here was basically an example of forbidden love, since the princess was the only daughter of the king, and Claude was the child of a late concubine of the king. and Leonid here was the head knight who was in charge of maintaining order in the kingdom. Hence, right now he was the pursuer and was witnessing something illegal right in front of him. The prince stood his ground and made it very clear that he was not going to hand over Rosetta, and in fact, he was even ready to take the head knight as his opponent in order to save his love. Seeing the serious expression on his face, Elizabeth requested him to just wait and try to understand. However, he just scratched his head and told them that he was not there for a fight, which left all of them really surprised. A carriage then arrived outside the church, and it turned out that Christart himself had come to pay them a visit, and as a noble, he was more than happy to be a witness to the couple's wedding. But then when he saw who the couple actually was, he was a bit taken aback and felt a bit awkward, but tried his best not to ruin their mood and told them to go ahead and enjoy their stay. Worried, Claude asked him if the two of them were seriously going to turn a blind eye to their marriage, and at first, Christart did not really understand what he meant by the two of them. But then he looked to the side, and Leonid was just standing there. He understood that Leonid must have read between the lines as well and was actually impressed with him, seeing that he was finally learning. Since that was the case, Christart took his leave from them, as the presence of two nobles in that place could cause a national scandal. However, as he tried to leave with Leonid, he just did not budge at all, no matter how hard he pulled him, and Christart wondered why the hell he was not moving from that place. He had thought that Leonid was finally starting to read between the lines, but his actions were speaking otherwise, and he could not understand how his mind was working. He looked at Elizabeth and gestured to her, asking her why Leonid was not moving, and she had no idea either. So she decided to step in, and first she assured the guests that Leonid was on leave from his duty as head knight, so they did not need to worry about that. And since his presence was quite intimidating, she was going to have him leave, and she requested him to come outside with her for a moment. As she dragged him out of the church, Christart just looked at them and thought about how easily that statue of a being was moving when she was the one pushing him.